A world movement, relatively substantial worldwide movement is forming called the Disclosure Movement, certainly assisted by the internet, which is phenomenal in its ability to network political issues and advocacy. Not only words, but as you know, video now, so that any matter can be distributed and one can align with it very easily. And this even includes some of the phenomenally growing entities like Facebook, where PRG has 2 groups now, and we'll have a main group shortly. Some of these groups on Facebook have hundreds of thousands of members that are in direct communication. So all of this is part of a new emerging political activism. It makes it possible to address any issue, no matter how radioactive, right? So that perhaps in the future there will be no such thing as the third rail of American politics, which is essentially just an excuse for people not to cover it. Oh, it's the third rail, so we won't cover it. Pick one. This is the third rail this year. Next year it's something else. Well, for a very long time, Social Security was the third rail of American politics, which is frankly an infantile and ridiculous way to think about the issue, and so it wasn't dealt with. Well, I can assure you there is a third rail and has been of American politics, and that is the UFO ET question. It is many magnitudes more radioactive than Social Security ever dreamed to be, and that issue, of course, is what we're addressing today. Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much for being here. My story with regard to the disclosure process is very simple. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico, the site of the first UFO crash, the alleged UFO crash. And my story is as a result of growing up there. I was a senior in high school, just going into the my senior year in 1947, when on one day the Roswell Record announced that an alien craft had crashed, and the next day changed that story and said no, the Air Force said that was a weather balloon. And since I was on my way to college and more interested in those things, I didn't pay much attention to it at that point in time. However, my family was in the agribusiness. My grandfather was a cattle buyer and sold registered Hereford bulls to the ranchers in the area, knew everybody in the area, in the Pecos Valley and beyond, sold cattle into Arizona, western Texas, and was affectionately known as Bull Mitchell in those parts. And so it was not unsurprising to me later on that the lore of the area, of our friends and the people in Roswell, including the sheriff's department. But after my Apollo flight, when I was back in the area and visiting relatives and friends, some of the people in the area who had been involved, what I call the old timers, who were involved in the 1940s, 1947, and subsequent with the Roswell crash, and people like in the sheriff's department who had been to the crash site and were supervising traffic. My friend and friend of our family, the major, who was an office mate of in the administrative function at Walker Air Force Base. These folks, because they had been shushed and told not to talk about their experience by military authority in those days, and on dire consequence if they did, felt that here in the 70s, many, many years later, that they didn't want to go to the grave with their story. They wanted to tell somebody reliable. And being a local boy and having been to the moon, they considered me reliable enough to whisper in my ear their particular story and their association with the Roswell crash, including the family of the undertaker who provided coffins for the alleged alien victims, and others on site who had been involved or knew the story. And of course, eventually I ran into Jesse Marcel Jr., the son of the Jesse Marcel, who was the first military officer on the site. and knew his story, and I knew his story well, and we became friends in later years in this disclosure movement. And at some point, about 10 years ago, and I can't remember what date it was right now, when the disclosure movement was going strongly, I came here to Washington with a Navy commander by the name of Will Miller and Dr. Stephen Greer, and we were able to get an appointment at the Pentagon to talk about what we knew, or what we allegedly knew, what we thought we knew, and went and told our story. The powers that be at the Intelligence Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff listened to our story and said, the Admiral said, well, I don't know that story. I don't know that that's true, but I will find out. So we departed, went on our way, and subsequently learned through Dr. Greer and through Will Miller, and that those stories had been confirmed, and that the Admiral had been denied access when he tried to get into the inner workings of that process. And we had confirmation of that, although that Admiral now denies the fact that this is the fact. So my story is essentially that. I do have no firsthand experience with the ET effort, except the fact that I know all of these research people that you'll hear from today, and some who are not here today, who have spent a long amount of their lives and time doing research into the alien visitation, UFO crashes, and so forth. And I urge that those who are doubtful read the books, read the lore, and start to understand what has really been going on, because there is no doubt we are being visited. And as a person who is a part of the first generation of being a spacefarer of our civilization and having gone to the moon, and realizing that I do, and many of us do now, that have seen the Hubble pictures from space, the universe that we live in is much more wondrous, exciting, complex, and far-reaching than we were ever able to know up to this point in time. And the fact we have wondered, were we alone in the universe forever? Only in our period do we really have evidence, no, we're not alone. We are just one planet with intelligent life on it, and probably it is time, now that we are spacefarers on our planet, that we get active, because we're really universal beings. And in the long stretch of things, if we think about it in the longest possible range, we realize, and I realize this from my studies in astronomy and astrophysics, our sun will burn out in due course, and we have to be off this planet if our species is to survive. So anybody, any species, any planet that is on around a mainstream star like ours is, only has a finite amount of time. But let's put all that aside for a moment, because we're here to talk about disclosure. And what I am suggesting is it is now time to put away this embargo of truth about the alien presence. And I call upon our government to open up like other governments have, and you will hear about that this morning, like the Belgians have, the French have, the Brazilians have, the Argentines, the Mexicans have all released their files. It's about time now that we do the same thing and become a part of this planetary community that is now trying to take our proper role as spacefaring civilization. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Torres and Dr. Mitchell about a year and a half apart.
He's senior to me.
Just a touch.
As a matter of fact, we never met until today, this session. When the Korean War broke out, I said, geez, I want to fly. I don't want to go into the Army. I don't like laying in mud. So, so I went to the Air Force and said, sign me up, and they did. I didn't know that I was the luckiest guy in the world. When I was in the Air Force, they said, would you like to be a pilot? Boy, the greatest thing. I had no college, I had nothing. And I volunteered, and lo and behold, I was in the top of my class, not the very top, but right number 10 or something like that. But we would have our choice of airplanes when we graduated from flight training. And I picked a fighter. I wanted the F-86F to go to Korea and shoot down some MiGs. I mean, that's the way it was in those days. They disappointed me in one sense. They gave me an F-86, but not an F. They gave me the D model. The D model was a new all-weather version so that we could have somebody launch on alert to go after the bad guys, whoever they may be coming in. They equipped us with nice radar sets so we could tell everything from on an intercept. And my first assignment out of F-86D school was RAF Station Manston. Don't forget it, it's the oldest base in England, in the RAF. I carry it right here. Bottom line, we finally became combat ready. We went down to Tripoli, Wheelers Air Force Base, fired rocketry, so we got pretty damn good at shooting down whatever it is that's going to come and get us. So they sent us back to England, and we became combat ready, which meant we were going to share with the RAF the defense of Britain during the Cold War years. But the bottom line was we're sitting alert, and sure enough, the klaxon goes off, and we're scrambled. And we had a kind of a deal amongst the fighter pilots. The first one to the runway is the lead. I elected to be the first, and I got there. Anyway, when I got there and took off, they scrambled me. They said, heading is 020, and they gave us the frequency of GCI and said, contact GCI when you're airborne. I did. And when I did, and mind you, I was only 25 years old. I was, a kid, so to speak. But when I talked to the GCI, we're going to warn you, we're going to have a hot mission. You will have to fire all your rockets. Select 24. That's all the rockets we had, 24. And that ever scared the hell out of me. It was for real. I was an afterburner, and I said, I'd like to come out of afterburner. It said, no, go gate, stay gate. That was the symbol for going in your afterburner, because we want you to get this guy. He's been orbiting Ipswich, and he was in that area, and we're going to get you there. It took us out over France, and it turned us back. The firing heading was something around 350, something like that. But that's not important. What's important is we were in the soup, and I mean, it was solid. It was to 32,000 feet, and we never saw each other. I had my wingman with me until we broke off, and he went in trail with me. On the way up, they were positioning us to make this intercept on this orbiting vehicle. Apparently, somebody made a decision to shoot him down before I even was launched. I didn't know that, but they finally gave us our final vector, and we went in there, and they said, be advised, you'll have a bogey at 30 degrees at 15 miles on the port side. And sure enough, when I started painting it, I got this blob. It was not a blip, it was a blob. It was about the size you'd get of an aircraft carrier in the North Sea when you painted them. This was humongous for me. It was so strong that it literally, I didn't have to do anything to lock on except get the range gate marker near where the blip was. And boy, when it did, it just automatically, the lights went out, everything, and you had firing information already. And it was one of those things that just was a storybook flight. So I was going in, and at 20 seconds to go, on the lock-on, we start our final penetration to the fire. Now, the information we get from the radar says this guy was going fast at this time, He was going about maybe 100 knots faster than I was, and I was at Mach .92, which was all the F-86D could do. It's not like the modern jets. Well, sure enough, I started getting down there, ready to fire, and the circle started coming down, and the next thing I know, the overtake went from whatever it was, my speed, it was about 1,000 knots, something like that. If he took off at, I estimated about 10, Mach 10 in an airplane that doesn't go Mach 10. You know, airplanes don't go Mach 10. Not that anything I've ever seen. And this was never made by a human being. This was something that was totally different. I've never seen. He could do things that I couldn't do. He could stop and start and keep going and everything else. But he took off. And he took off, and in 2 sweeps on the ground, he was off their scope. He was off my scope sooner than that. But as soon as that happened, the mission was over, and I couldn't fire. So on the way down, the GCI controller says, contact us on the landline. We have very important information for you. I said, Roger. And I did that. I recovered at Manston. The weather was still bad. It was still night. And I had an entire mission with night weather, which was Joule time on your Form 5. Anyway, I got down, got to the phone, called the landline. They said, this is a top secret mission. I don't know why, but that's what it was. And it says, you're not to talk about it. We're going to send someone down from London to talk to you and debrief you tomorrow. I said, yes, sir, thank you, and hung up. Sure enough, the next day, a spook. You know what a spook is? A spook is some guy from Cloak and Dagger who wants to debrief you on something. So I don't know what the hell it was. You know, I'm not going to tell him. So anyway, he says, I want you to know this is a top secret mission. You're not allowed to tell your commander or anyone else anything about this, or we will take your wings away. You know, when you're 25 years old and you want to start flying, you don't want to hear that. So I put a zipper on my mouth, and that was the end of that. I could never talk about it again until Nick Pope's people from the Ministry of Defense, they call it MOD, M-O-D, like our DOD, exposed all their data on October 21st. I remember because I got a warning from a friend of mine in England that I would be exposed on my mission on October 21st. Sure enough, the phone started ringing. It rang for 4 days, non-stop. This is the London Times, this is so-and-so, ABC, NBC, name it, this is CNN, and so on. Anyway, make a long story short, I am now able to talk about my experience that I just told you about. Disclosure is what we need. There are many more people like me that are running around with secrets that they can't talk about because nobody will release it. And I think we should get together even with the Russians, because I'm sure they know a hell of a lot more about these aliens than we do. But it's a really important thing for us to know about this thing so we can go forward. They have technology that we haven't even dreamt of. I'm sure their propulsion system was something like anti-gravity or something like that, because they could stop on a dime, they can take off at Mach 10 or greater. It's unbelievable what they can do. So we need to know these things. So the only reason I'm here is to tell you, let's disclose this whenever we can, please. Thank you.
Come up will be Nick Pope, who for many years worked for the Ministry of Defense in the United Kingdom. He was a senior executive officer, and for 2 years was specifically assigned to investigate UFOs for the Ministry of Defense. I'm not sure that really anybody has had that role here, and certainly the United States government has done nothing in that since 1968, when they said there was nothing to check anymore. Obviously, he's done this quite more recently, so apparently the UK government seems to be a little more diligent about this. And the reason he is here is because the UK government made a decision right after the French government started releasing all of their files to the internet to start releasing the UK files. And they've done it in a time-release fashion, so they're releasing thousands of files, and then they'll wait 6 months and thousands more, and then each time they do that, it generates a whole news cycle again as various reports come out alluding to events that happened and then news articles about these events all over the UK, generating hundreds and hundreds of articles. This has generated a lot of press in the UK, a lot of activity, there's a lot going on, and this gentleman has been in the middle of it all. And so we want him to brief you about that. And so Nick, will you come to the mic, please?
Thank you. Good morning. I worked for the Ministry of Defence for 21 years, and between 1991 and 1994, I was actually the person responsible for investigating UFO sightings. 95% of them turned out after investigation to be misidentifications of fairly ordinary objects and phenomena. But there were some interesting cases in there, including sightings by police officers, pilots, both commercial and military, UFO sightings tracked on radar. As Steve said, the British government is in the process of releasing its entire archive of UFO files, and one can now go to the Ministry of Defence website, the National Archives website, and see tens of thousands of pages of documentation. Most of the files are sighting reports, but there are also policy papers, including some classified up to the level secret UK eyes only, now declassified, of course. There have been 3 batches of files released to date, and it was the last batch of files, last but one batch of files that included the report of Major Milton Torres's sighting. UFO sightings in Britain continue. There were twice as many reported to the Ministry of Defence in 2008 as opposed to 2007. Cases included an interesting one on 2nd of May last year, where a police helicopter had to take evasive action to avoid what the pilot described as a UFO. And again, this report can be read on the website of the AirProx board. AirProx is air proximity, and it's jointly sponsored by the Ministry of Defence and the Civil Aviation Authority, which is the UK equivalent of your FAA. Bottom line, from a personal point of view, having worked on these files for 3 years, I don't know what UFOs are. But when one looks at cases such as that of Major Torres and many others, because there have been others, when one looks at the police helicopter and the pilot having to take evasive action, it's perfectly clear to me, and was clear to a number of my other colleagues, that whatever the true nature of the UFO phenomenon, it raises important defence, national security and air safety issues, and therefore needs to be something taken seriously and investigated in a proper scientific manner. Thank you.
All right, stay right there. All right. At this time, are there any questions directed for Nick from the media? Do we have a question? Okay, he will be available afterwards. I do have a question myself. Nick, oh, yes, right there.
Nick, has there been any attempt by the British government to do any technological back engineering, such as what we suppose is happening here in this Area 51 type?
I'm not aware of that, but one possible example, we had a very convincing photograph sent to us, which was actually on my office wall for a number of years. And I remember going to discuss that with my opposite number in the Defence Intelligence staff. And whilst there was nothing to work with except the image, obviously by showing that image to the technical specialists at MOD who were responsible for photographic interpretation, there was a hope that we would at least be able to find out something about the aerodynamics and possibly the propulsion system of whatever this thing was, and we didn't know.
I have a question. Nick, were there other indications in those files of other incidents where pilots were asked to shoot at UFOs besides Milton Torres?
I can't recall any other shoot-down orders. Of course, there have been a couple of other very famous cases from other countries. Iran in 1976, Peru in 1980. There have certainly been cases where commercial airline pilots have had very near misses with UFOs. One of the reports in the second batch of material involved an aircraft with 57 passengers on board flying into London, and something flashed across at a height of about 22,000 feet, and the pilot simply had time to say, "Look out, look out." So there are a number of near misses involving military aircraft and commercial pilots. I'm not aware of any other shoot-down orders in the UK, but there may well have been. There may have been some files that I missed during my tour of duty.
Okay, the question, yes?
Yes, Mr. Pope, what is your current status with MOD, and are you acting on their official behalf in being here?
No, I left the Ministry of Defence. I resigned in 2006, so I'm speaking entirely in a personal capacity. That said, of course, I'm drawing on declassified material from the MOD's archives.
Quick follow-up then, do you have a current counterpart at MOD who's at the desk where you were, and will they confirm and discuss more what you're saying about the process of declassification?
I do have a counterpart who's still there, but any contact with the media would need to be through the MOD's press office.
Thank you.
Another question?
I was wondering, during your time in your tenure at the MOD, did you have any cooperation with the American counterparts regarding this issue?
No, we didn't. One of the first things that I did was try to establish lines of communication with an opposite number in the US, but I was told, after inquiries through the embassy, that there was no official UFO project in the US following the closure of Project Blue Book. We did have one or two indications that, notwithstanding the fact that there wasn't a formally constituted project, that people were at some level paying attention to this issue, but that may have been on a case-by-case basis. But of course I would find it personally very surprising, particularly 9/11, if somebody somewhere in the US administration wasn't looking at the more interesting cases that I know you do have involving pilot sightings, radar returns, etc.
Question?
From what you said, is it possible that there still are some classified reports that you may not have access to that would describe crashed vehicles in the UK?
I think that my combination of security clearance and need to know during that time would have given me access had there been such a thing. And I think even if, in my dealings with the Defence Intelligence staff, if there had been something like that, I like to think that I would have got some hint. But I got absolutely no hint. Of course, I can't prove a negative, but as far as I'm concerned, my colleagues and I in the British government were not aware of the nature of the UFO phenomenon. We found it interesting, but the bottom line was we didn't know what it was.
I'm trying to figure out what the classified reports may contain.
Well, classified, some of the more highly classified documents on UFOs, of course, relate not to extraterrestrial spacecraft, but to, for example, information about the capability of military radar systems, information that would, if released, show methods and sources of gathering intelligence.
It's clear that pilot sightings are extremely important, and I want to point out that Richard Haynes was instrumental for many years in compiling the largest database of pilot sightings in the world. At one point it was at 3,500. Lord knows where it is now. He worked for NASA for many years. I believe he's retired. I believe that database is now in the hands of NICAR. It's a group that deals with the issue of this phenomena and aerial safety. Very professional operation. How many they have now, I do not know, but I know that because Dr. Haynes was doing that, many pilots who could not speak anywhere else would come and give them the report, and they might very well be anonymous in that, but they had a place to go and talk. I don't think that Dr. Torres knew that. And so that database is probably, and I feel, very likely the single most profound collection of data confirming the presence of extraterrestrials, because these reports simply do not describe human-based craft in the collective. But the press has been very reluctant to really go and look at that. But it's there, it's been there for many years. You may want to do that. All right, now I'm going to bring to the stand a gentleman who is, again, one of the speakers at the X conference, who has a new book coming out and wants to mention that, Richard Dolan.
Thank you, Stephen, and good morning. My name is Richard Dolan. I am the author of a study entitled UFOs in the National Security State. I'm happy to announce the publication of the second volume of this three-volume history, which covers the UFO phenomenon from the Second World War to the present day. This new study, subtitled The Cover-Up Exposed, is due for release in the late spring of 2009. It covers the years 1973 to 1991, a period of time spanning from the Nixon administration through the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. Using archival sources from the United States and Canadian National Archives, professional journals, and direct investigations and personal interviews that I've conducted, the 600-page study provides a comprehensive analysis of the critical UFO encounters by military and civilians worldwide. These encounters, all thoroughly documented and equally baffling, repeatedly demonstrate that the UFO phenomenon has been a global one and the result of highly advanced technology that has received no official recognition. Now, many of these cases involve the violation of sensitive U.S. military airspace, as well as that of other nations. Some of these include the unexplained intrusions over American and Canadian air bases in late 1975, the spectacular interception attempts of a UFO over Tehran in Iran in 1976, an event tracked by American defense satellites, incidentally, the landing of an unknown object near two American-operated air bases in Britain in 1980, the Bentwaters case just referred to, the appearance of large boomerang-shaped craft north of New York City during the 1980s, military records describing attempts to intercept UFOs by the nations of Europe, South America, Africa, Australia, and Asia, the appearance of triangular craft throughout the United States, Europe, and the Soviet Union, including the attempted interception of a triangular aircraft by Belgian F-16s in 1990, and numerous sightings of anomalous objects in Earth orbit by Soviet and American astronauts, in particular those in the shuttle program. This study also presents an analysis of UFO secrecy itself, throwing light on areas that have long operated in darkness. I have tried to analyze the structure of power behind the scenes. I've tried to describe black budget and special access programs and how they factor into this, studying the relationship of military versus corporate secrecy of the UFO phenomenon. And I have attempted to provide a geopolitical analysis throughout to bring the topic of UFO secrecy into the mainstream of historical understanding. Finally, I am happy to mention that this study provides a first ever analysis of the history of UFO research itself. I have recreated the discussions and debates concerning the topics that polarized UFO research during those years, such as alien abductions, animal mutilations, intelligence community infiltration into UFO research, the controversial MJ-12 documents, the Gulf Breeze controversy, claims about reverse engineering of alien technology, crop circles, and much more. I've also studied the effect of new technologies, such as the internet, on UFO research. I've attempted to provide a thorough and complete history of the phenomenon, the secrecy, and the response by researchers who sought to understand this mystery. Behind it all is a backdrop of a world in technological, economic, and political transformation. UFOs in the national security state, the cover-up exposed, is my attempt to take the reader through a fascinating turning point in the history of the UFO phenomenon, as well as the history of the modern world. The book is due for publication in June 2009. I would encourage you to visit my website, keyholepublishing.com, for announcements of publication and availability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard, can you get this press release and put it right here? Show it. Now, I wish to bring forward another speaker from the X Conference. He is an exopolitical activist and a political activist before that, going back many, many years. He's been involved in multiple projects. He has a Juris Doctor from Yale, currently lives in Canada, and he has another initiative he's working on with a number of individuals, and he wants to announce the developments there. Would you come forward, Alfred Weber? And the press releases on this are going to be up here as well. You can come and get it later.
Yes, Steve, thank you very much. I'm Alfred Lambermont Weber of the Institute for Cooperation in Space, and I'm making this statement on behalf of a citizens' initiative led by Ambassador John McDonald of the Institute for Multitrack Diplomacy, who's here with us, as well as Dr. Michael Sala of the Exopolitics Institute, who's with us, and Victor Vigiani of Exopolitics Toronto, who's present in the room also. And the headline here is UN General Assembly President and Secretariat official ready for action on the extraterrestrial presence. What is needed is one sponsoring UN member nation, one out of 192 current members of the United Nations General Assembly. A senior official in the office of UN General Assembly President Miguel de Scotto Brockman of Nicaragua. President Brockman was the Sandinista foreign minister of Nicaragua from 1979 to 1990 and is currently the president of the UN General Assembly. His chief of cabinet, Dr. Norman Miranda of Nicaragua, with whom I had the pleasure of speaking for many hours, has confirmed to representatives of a citizens' initiative that the UN General Assembly President's office is ready to move forward in the General Assembly on a resolution calling for implementation of UN General Assembly Decision 33426 of 1978. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the adoption of UN General Assembly Decision 33426, which calls for, quote, and I'm quoting from the decision, the establishment of an agency or department of the United Nations for undertaking, coordinating, and disseminating the results of research into unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and related phenomena. Likewise, Juan Carlos Brandt, the UN Secretariat's UN Chief of Advocacy and Special Events, who coordinated the recent United Nations panel on Battlestar Galactica, you may recall that was in the news, has stated publicly, quote, if there is one UN member state that would ask for a meeting on extraterrestrials, it would take place, end of quote. What is missing so far is a UN member nation to introduce the implementing resolution, implementing the decision taken 30 years ago to establish a UN agency on extraterrestrial issues. Grenada and its forward-looking Prime Minister, Sir Eric Gary, was instrumental in sponsoring and ensuring the passage of the 1978 Decision 33426. Now, in recent years, UN member nations have begun to unofficially release, as has been stated here, some of the secret files related to unidentified flying objects and extraterrestrial civilizations. These include Mexico in 2004, Brazil in 2005, Canada from 2005 to 2007, France in 2007, the UK Ministry of Defense 2007 to 2009, and Denmark in 2009. So we are officially putting forward a call today for one or more of the 192 UN member nations to come forward and to take up the commitment of the UN General Assembly President and senior officials in the Secretariat to shepherd through the resolution. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Alfred. And of course, Alfred will be available afterwards for any questions. The press release is up here. This gentleman, Dr. Roger Leir, is the leading researcher in the world on the removal of alleged implants or artifacts from individuals who believe they have had contact. The number of reports of contact, direct, including abductions, are in the tens and tens of thousands. They are filling the filing cabinets of researchers all over the world. The numbers could even be at 100,000. Many, many hundreds of these reports have been extensively written up. Many thousands have been investigated. The material is out there. Review it at your leisure. But one of the aspects that is reported all over the world is this concept of implants. Dr. Leir has removed a number of these. An implant was removed of extraordinary nature, a breakthrough really, and Dr. Leir is here to tell you about it. Now, we're not, as all of the other speakers that you saw tonight, presenters, he spoke at the X conference at length, an hour and a half. There's a DVD that has been made of that. What he's trying to convey is complex and difficult. There's no time here for a lecture. So if you want to really get into this, you're going to have to get with him and you're going to have to spend some time. But to the best that he can, he is going to present the essence of this breakthrough to you today, and then it's up to you to decide whether you think this is news. I have a good hunch you're going to make the right decision. Dr. Leir, come up, and if there's anything you need for me to help you in terms of setting up the presentation. And he will be accompanied by Alex Moser, one of a number of analysts at high level that have examined this artifact and derived the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Steve outlined, I am involved in research in just a very small portion of the field of ufology, and we've made some startling discoveries in the subject of alien abduction. Now, let me preface my remarks by saying if there was anyone present in this room or interested in reporting this information to the public that thinks that my remarks are funny, I think you're in the wrong place. With that being said, those of you that have press packets, I refer you to slide number 1. The Roper poll, which was done in 2003, indicated that there was approximately 2% of the American population that was involved in alien abduction. We believe that's a conservative figure, and if you multiply this by the population of the world, we're not talking about tens of thousands, but we're talking about multi-millions of individuals. Some of these individuals have like memories, what's been done on a craft, the objectives of what they can remember. Most of them do not have memories that are very, very explicit. Some need help with memory retrieval. What we've done is to set up a situation in which we don't allow anyone to undergo a surgical procedure that has had previous hypnosis. And that's just primarily from the fact that we don't need the criticism in a scientific study. However, if the information that is retrievable is to be had, we give that person the choice following the surgery procedure, and we refer them to a qualified specialist in that area. So today we're going to refer to some new information in a scientific vein only, and I'll try and spoon feed this to you as easily as possible without going into a lot of biological detail. Slide 1A in the press packet will show a picture of what one of these objects looks like. This is a T-shaped object, which is approximately a sonometer in each direction, covered with a very strange biological coating, a coating that is so strong that when the object is freshly removed, you can't cut through it with a surgical blade. The next slide is slide 1B. Shows another kind of an object that we removed, another metallic rod, which is also covered with a similar dark gray impervious membrane. And this material is also very strong, and you can't cut through it with a surgical blade. We have, at the present time, with our 15 surgeries, we have approximately 7 of these objects in which you could line them up on a surgical drape. You would not be able to tell one from the other. Next, we'll refer you to slide 2. Of the 15 surgeries that have been performed, we have submitted these not in totality but in piece, because we haven't had the funds to really go into this in a full-blown project. Fortunately, I was able to get assistance at one time through the National Institute for Discovery Science, and that was much appreciated. That's a Bob Bigelow enterprise, and I will always be indebted to him for his help with this. Now, there are some biological aspects which I have to mention at this time. If you get an object in you, you usually can see where it went in, a portal of entry. Something that's a sonometer in various dimensions is a pretty big sized piece to get inside. You usually should be able to see where this went in. In none of these cases has there been a scar or an opening in the skin. All the individuals who allege have implants are submitted to some rigorous examination before we have anything to do with them. They must produce either on an X-ray or a CAT scan a viable object which is more radiodense than the surrounding area. We see when these have been removed and we examine the tissue pathologically that goes around the area, there has been absolutely no inflammatory or rejection reaction. This is, within our technology, not possible. The majority of these objects, as I described, are these small metallic rods covered with this very strange biological coating. And quite recently, we found out that, I hope you're all sitting down, that this biological coating seems to be growing from the metallic structure within. We believe that this biological tissue serves as a barrier so that the body does not reject the object or cause inflammation to occur. And as you can see, if we had the funds to back engineer this and find out how this works, it would be a tremendous boon to medical science, as we could wrap a transplant organ, a pin, a screw, or something of that nature, put it into the body, and the individual would no longer have to take immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of their lives. I refer you now to slide 3, and unfortunately, we can't do much with this one because there's a small segment, about 30 seconds, of one of the surgical procedures that was performed. We were going to show that to you, but unfortunately, we weren't able to get that facility set up. So in conclusion, in reference to the biological data, we have looked at this in quite an exceptional manner, using every bit of science that's at our disposal, and we see that this looks like it represents a science which far exceeds the biological science that we have on Earth. Now, when we get into the metallic portion, I don't feel qualified I had to learn the small amount of metallurgy that I did in order to continue the work. But we're very fortunate today, ladies and gentlemen, to have one of the leading metallurgical sciences with us that has worked on the project, our chief metallurgical science, Dr. Alex Moser. If I can have you come up here, Alex, and you can take it from here.
Well, my background first, just to let you know, is I've got a PhD in physical chemistry. I've got a lot of strength in analytical instrumentation analysis, materials analysis. I've designed and built my own instruments from Raman to haze meters and the like. So we had a number of analyses performed, both within, while the sample was within the body and also outside. So if we refer to slide 10, we can see the summary of the analysis performed. First in vivo, that was a radio frequency for determination of electromagnetic emission, X-ray for object verification, just as Dr. Lear had said, and CAT scan for object location. The in vitro, essentially outside the body in controlled conditions, was optical microscopy, and that was just for looking at microscopic appearance and comparing it to other similar objects. And also SEM EDX, which is scanning electron microscopy, so we can look at nanoscaled structures. And also coupled with that is EDX, which is energy dispersive X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, and that's just for elemental analysis down to the sub% range. We also did Raman, which which looks at the vibrational modes of either molecules or crystals, and that's for chemical determination, and also ICP MS, which is inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry for elemental and hopefully isotopic analysis. So if we go to the next slide, slide 11, it just shows the results for the electromagnetic analysis. And from a Gauss meter, we saw that the magnetic strength was between 5 and 10 milligauss. And with a few different radio frequency analyzers, we could see that there were radio frequency emissions around the 14.7 megahertz range, and also in the gigahertz range at 17.6 gigahertz. And so this just shows that there seems to be some unusual emission. We would like to have some more controlled tests, but initially this shows that there could be some unusual behavior occurring. If you go to slide 12 with the X-ray, the image doesn't show up, the object doesn't show up very well on these images, and so again, we'll post these on our website. But you can clearly, well, if you look carefully, you can see that there's an object showing right next to the bone, but separated from the bone in the subject's toe. And the optical microscopy. There's essentially 3 different columns in the press pack, and the first column shows the object under low magnification, the second column shows the object under higher magnification, and the last column, just for comparison, shows meteorite fragments. And you can see there's similarities and there's also some differences. Similarities, it has the same color tones, it likely has similar composition in oxides. The difference, the biggest difference, is that the object taken out of the subject's body had some kind of a sheen to it, which possibly could be silicon material or some other hard material, hard shell. And then if you go to slide 14, you can see the results, at least for the scanning electron microscopy. And here again, we've got different columns with different sorts of materials. The first column, the column on the left, you can see there's this is actually from the object itself, and it shows some kind of nanofibers. And for comparison, in the middle column, you can see that we've got a standard image of carbon nanotubes, single-walled carbon nanotubes. And there's certainly similarity in the scales and lengths. And then also an interesting nanocrystal showed up as well, which turned out to be primarily sodium chloride through EDX analysis. But the unusual thing is, first of all, these things form, sodium chloride should have a certain type of crystal habit, a very cubic crystal habit. Sometimes, because of crystal growth reasons, it will be slightly off from that. The unusual thing about these crystals is that they produced an orthorhombic crystal habit, what appears to be an orthorhombic crystal habit, which is unusual for sodium chloride. So this speaks of possibly some kind of advanced engineering of crystals, perhaps for the use of either harvesting energy or creating some kind of resonator. All right, and then supporting that, we have the Raman spectroscopy, which shows up on slide 15. And we have two graphs here. Raman is basically, again, for probing vibrational modes and fingerprinting what types of molecules or crystals you might have in the object. And we've got the graph on the left-hand side is essentially looking at very low vibrational, very low energy modes. And the graph on the right-hand side actually looks like, you probably can't see that. The graph on the right-hand side shows the higher energy modes within this material. And the interesting thing is we compare it with a few different known materials. One, the one with the strongest signal is just pure single-walled carbon nanotubes. It's also compared, the object is compared against a meteorite fragment and also against silicon. And you can see that there's certain bands around a little lower than 1600 wave numbers. And that there's clearly a band there for carbon nanotubes, and there's also a small band that shows up in the object as well. And that band doesn't appear in a regular known meteorite. Now, so that supports the previous slides, the previous scanning electron micrographs, that those nanofibers could be carbon nanotubes. The correlation is pretty stark, actually. And so, again, having something like carbon nanotubes or nanofibers in this sort of object, you don't find these things in nature. They have to be somehow processed, engineered, and they're not easy to make. So, and of course, the field of carbon nanotubes is getting to be rather large now. It's an area of exploration in the sciences, and so we suspect that there's some kind of engineering occurring within this object. The ICP mass spec, the mass spectrometry, which also gives some kind of elemental analysis and even can offer some kind of isotopic ratio analysis, also showed some unusual data. And essentially, and this is on slide 16, because of the presence of gallium, germanium, platinum, ruthenium, rhodium, and iridium in the combination in which these elements show up, it's typical of a meteoric sample. Now, there are many different types of meteors that have been analyzed, but having that combination and the concentration combinations of those elements indicates that this might be a meteoric sample or something along those lines. Also, there was a deviation of nickel. This is looking, a deviation of nickel from terrestrial isotopic ratios that the analysis lab couldn't explain. And it requires further study. And so the combination of all these things, if we go to the conclusions, the combination of all this data indicates some kind of unusual engineering within this object. Elemental analysis indicates it's likely non-terrestrial. It could be meteoric, possibly. It could be something else. The SEM and Raman analysis indicate carbon nanotubes in the object. To date, carbon nanotubes have not been found in meteorites. There's one meteorite that's been analyzed that showed some kind of carbon onion structures or something resembling buckyballs, but nobody's ever found anything resembling carbon nanostructures or threads or fibers. So this is unusual in itself. And of course, the electromagnetic emissions indicate possibility of a functional device that may serve to monitor or control. Now, all this analysis that was performed on a relatively low budget. And to really do a very thorough analysis, we need more money to do this work, just to pay for the analysis itself. And there's many other analysis that we could do that might show some kind of a circuitry or some kind of structure similar to some kind of a operating circuit. And so we need to be able to perform those analysis and pay for those analysis and go through the whole entire analytical process in a much more thorough manner. I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stay right there. Do we have any questions at this time about this? This is very sophisticated stuff. Tom Vallone is a very sophisticated guy.
The two emissions in the megahertz and gigahertz frequencies,
Yeah.
you didn't indicate the wattage that might be measurable. Also, is this energy harvesting that's actually powering those emissions?
You're right. I mean, we really don't know. It certainly could be, and it would make sense. I mean, to power a device over the long term requires some kind of energy harvesting, and there's plenty of energy sources within the body itself, either thermal, vibrational, electromagnetic as well.
But you didn't measure the radiation.
Not in a fashion that was controlled to my liking. I mean, we have to have it within a Faraday cage and make very careful measurements. Yeah.
Okay, another question? Richard?
Yes, sir. Could you please just summarize, because that went way over my head.
Okay.
I dropped out.
Yeah. Sorry.
What Dr. Lear asserted, does your research show that this was A, non-terrestrial, and B, a device?
It's very likely it is non-terrestrial. I'm, let's say, 95% sure. And whether it's a device or not, I would say the electromagnetic emissions indicate that also there's about a 90% chance that it's a functional device. But we really need to do a lot more work.
So your evidence is consistent with...
Oh, yes.
You're,
Yes,
you're,
absolutely.
You're 90%, 90%.
Yeah.
So you sort of feel, short of scientific certainty, that this is a device of non-terrestrial origin.
Right.
Question?
Does the device continue transmitting once it is in vitro, outside the body?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think we had done that analysis.
The only thing we know is the magnetic decay is from about 2 to 6 weeks.
Okay, right.
So it loses its magnetism once it gets outside the body?
It doesn't seem to emit anything else after that time, yeah.
I was just going to say, I met with two generals. One of them has passed away, and they, in a private meeting, they both confirmed the abductions were real, and they even stated some of our own people in the Pentagon were being abducted.
Sure. Yep. That's right. Yeah. It's actually very, very big phenomena. It's happening quite often, quite frequently. Yeah.
I have a question about abductions. When those 2% of U.S. populations are abducted, how long they're gone? And how long later they come back?
Well, there's, yeah. Do you want to answer that one? Because there's many different,
The abduction phenomena involves in linear time, varying amounts of time. Now, I've studied these cases over a period of number of years. And as you know, the Travis Walton case is a case in which the individual was taken aboard a craft, and it was days later before he was returned in linear time. However, many abductees will report that there is seemingly no time differential between the time they are taken and the time they were returned. There are other things about the phenomena which require a lot more study and better understanding through earthly science. The reports by individuals who are on a craft may see things that are disproportionate to what we see as far as even in linear measurement. A craft from the outside may look like it's one dimension. On the inside, it can look like it's 10 to 15 times the size. So to answer your question, as in linear time, that's the best example I can give. It's either from 0 to the longest known case is about 7 days.
Other questions? Question right there.
Yes.
Yes? Speak up, please.
Okay, so, when people are gone for 7 days, your families or friends are worried about that because we don't have so many abduction reports.
That's true, because the average abduction case, they are not gone for 7 days. And the Travis Walton case was a rather unusual case, which I won't go into, but the family and the police department of Snowflake, Arizona, were looking for this man. He was a forester, and he was with a crew, and the crew had been taken in and accused of kidnapping and murder. So this is not typical of an ordinary abduction case.
Our time is short, so we need more. The abduction phenomena, contactee phenomena, is vast. The resources are enormous. You can go out and spend many weeks reading it. If you got a question specific to this implant's extraordinary physics, any questions there? Any more? Okay, would you go ahead and sit down, please? Thank you so much, gentlemen. A world movement, relatively substantial worldwide movement is forming, called the Disclosure Movement, certainly assisted by the internet, which is phenomenal in its ability to network political issues and advocacy. Not only words, but as you know, video now, so that any matter can be distributed and one can align with it very easily. And this even includes some of the phenomenally growing entities like Facebook, where PRG has 2 groups now, and we'll have a main group shortly. Some of these groups on Facebook have hundreds of thousands of members that are in direct communication. So all of this is part of a new emerging political activism. It makes it possible to address any issue, no matter how radioactive, right? So that perhaps in the future there will be no such thing as the third rail of American politics, which is essentially just an excuse for people not to cover it. Oh, it's the third rail, so we won't cover it. Pick one. This is the third rail this year. Next year it's something else. Well, for a very long time, Social Security was the third rail of American politics, which is frankly an infantile and ridiculous way to think about the issue, and so it wasn't dealt with. Well, I can assure you there is a third rail, and has been, of American politics, and that is the UFO ET question. It is many magnitudes more radioactive than Social Security ever dreamed to be, and that issue, of course, is what we're addressing today. One of the things that Paradigm Research Group does is it publishes a news media archive or news media watch of the mainstream coverage of this issue. And at the ParadigmResearchGroup.org website, you can, if you can plow through the vast amount of material there, you will find the News Media Archive link, and you will go there. Currently, we have 2,800, I forget, 2,400 mainstream, non-paranormal, non-alternative press, English language articles from around the world up there, going back to 1947. But what's notable is that starting in 1996, something started. 2006, I'm sorry. Something happened. And the number of articles we logged in was about 476. then using the same resources, the next year they jumped to, I think, it was 176 to 476, and then 2008 to 1,200, and in 2009 we were on a pace for 2,000 articles on the subject. I've read them all, and approximately 1 in 100 is what I would call a hit piece or a ridicule piece. Not that anything can't be hit or ridiculed, of course it can, but 1 in 100 is quite extraordinary. I can assure you that something has happened at the editorial offices of newspapers and television. They have made decisions that, yes, we will go here, we will look at this, we will interview, we will talk, we will cover everything, books, conferences, reports, other developments. It's extremely important. I'm very pleased to see the great Fourth Estate coming around and getting into this and doing their job here. I think they will be very richly rewarded. Now, I want to make a point. Both of the gentlemen, I think the news here today is, because this gentleman was interviewed back in October, that's not news, but the news today is both of these gentlemen are calling on the, obviously, since you want this done now, they're calling on the current administration to do this, the Obama administration, to exercise the disclosure event, to bring the information out, and perhaps confirm the extraterrestrial presence. But they're not alone in that. If you do a cursory check on the internet, you can easily find that the former head of the transition team for the current president, the former chief of staff to President Clinton, the former advisor to President Clinton, John Podesta, and now the founder and the CEO of the Center for American Progress, has in this room, 2003, and in the Lissagore room, 2002, called for exactly the same thing, the release of all UFO documents by the United States government. Pretty high-level person said that. But there just wasn't enough press follow-up on that. They didn't really query him. They did not go deeper. Perhaps they will now. Then in 2004, a very fine gentleman who is currently the governor of New Mexico, who ran for president, was a high-level and possible vice presidential pick, Bill Richardson, wrote in a foreword to a book published that year in the summer that the Roswell explanation put forward by the government didn't add up, that it didn't make sense, and that we needed to know what happened. And he called for the release of all the records on Roswell, pretty high-level person. The press did not follow up. There was a question asked of him by Chris Matthews after the Philadelphia debate and the Democratic debates last year, and that was that. Well, we're back, and there will be others who will ask again, will you release these records? Will you release all documents? Will, in fact, you get to the truth of this? It's clear that pilot sightings are extremely important, and I want to point out that Richard Haynes was instrumental for many years in compiling the largest database of pilot sightings in the world. At one point it was at 3,500. Lord knows where it is now. He worked for NASA for many years. I believe he's retired. I believe that database is now in the hands of NICAR. It's a group that deals with the issue of this phenomena and aerial safety. Very professional operation. How many they have now, I do not know, but I know that because Dr. Haynes was doing that, many pilots who could not speak anywhere else would come and give them the report, and they might very well be anonymous in that, but they had a place to go and talk. I don't think that Dr. Torres knew that. And so that database is probably, and I feel, very likely the single most profound collection of data confirming the presence of extraterrestrials, because these reports simply do not describe human-based craft in the collective. But the press has been very reluctant to really go and look at that. But it's there, it's been there for many years. You may want to do that. As of about, I don't know, it's been about 10 days. Grant Cameron, a Canadian researcher, wonderful fellow, good friend, who for the last 11 years has been researching the intersection of this issue and all of the United States presidents back to Roosevelt, and has compiled through many hours in the presidential archives and the national archives a very substantial dossier regarding that. And I have been in a co-authored mode for a number of years, attempting to get this book published. We attempted to do it in 2003 and were turned down by every New York publishing company. As of 10 days ago, we were signed up with Overlook Press, in New York, which is run by publishing legend Peter Mayer, former head of Penguin Books and Avon Books. They're very excited, and they have offered a full release of the book, which will be U.S. Presidents and UFOs, The Untold Story, probably. And this will be written by Grant and myself, and it will cover that topic. And the key sections of that book will focus on the Clinton administration and the Carter administration. There are many people in the book connected to the issue who are living and still involved in public service. They include Jimmy Carter, Marcia Smith, former President H.W. Bush, former President Clinton, current Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Governor of New Mexico Bill Richardson, former head of transition and former Chief of Staff to Clinton John Podesta, Melvin Laird, Sheila Widnall, former head of the Office of Sci Technology Policy Dr. John Gibbons, and others. We will make every effort to interview these people so that they, one, can provide their own firsthand account of what we are writing about, and also to ensure that we get it right. And so we are certainly looking forward to having the opportunity to interview these individuals regarding this subject. I hope that perhaps they are looking forward to it too. I guess we'll know soon enough.